Thank you. Hello. 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 Thank you. I'm going to try and cover the two themes as I see them quite separately. The first one's the art, and we have a lovely picture there. And we have this idea of collaboration. So what I'm going to do in this session that's about collaboration is probably quite obvious, is I'm going to be trying to get you to collaborate as much as possible. What we're trying to look at is the situation that we find the event planner, the event industry as I see it now, and I'd be really interested to see how you see it now, and this idea of how we move it from where it is at the moment to where we all want it to be. And as the introduction that Nick said there about the industry and the planner being much more commanding, much more creative, and less of an administrator. So firstly, I just wanted to say I've been an event organizer for almost 20 years, and that's what I've always done, a little flurry with the music industry, but come back to the events industry. And I've noticed a huge amount of change in that period of time. And when I started in the event industry to where I am now, I think is an interesting journey that I'm sure some of you have been on as well. And when we started organising events, we were seen as an administrator, a logistics person. And I can remember on my first job, it was given some flags to put on some top tables. And that was probably the most exciting, engaging thing that I did at an exhibition. And I thought, I've been at university for this. I actually got the flags wrong, and the Azerbaijan ambassador was sitting in front of a Georgian flag, which is a terrible mistake. But these are the types of things that I think we all started in the industry. And when I was an event organizer, it was a very loose term. There was no event qualification. You went to university. If you did go to university, you did a different degree, and then you came into the world of events. And that's changed a lot now. And I'd be really interested to see how you all feel about the event organisers who you participate with, who you employ, who employ you, who you engage with. And I'd be really interested to see what you think that event organiser is like at the moment and what they could be. So most of my time within the event industry I spend doing consultancy for various organisations. And I see my role when I come into an organisation, any organisation at all who runs events, is to try and develop the event organiser who's in-house, or try and support them to get more out of the agency or the PCO that they use. And it's a really rewarding, but also a very challenging job to do. And these are some of the issues that I'd like us to discuss. When I go into an organisation and I start speaking to the event planner about say I ask a question, say, how does your event strategically align to the objectives of your organisation? I have to say for about 80% of the event organisers I speak to, that's like a foreign language. Now, that's not necessarily their fault. I would say in most circumstances that's not their fault, because their manager has never said to them, you're organising this event and here are the objectives that lead into the objectives of the organisation. And the event planner can feel siloed a little bit, just sitting in this little world that doesn't have the connection overall. But it's really interesting to see when you're speaking to event planners how little impact they think that they can have. I remember sitting with one organiser and I went through about the organisational goals and how it aligned to the event. And she sat half an hour smiling, taking everything in, taking notes. And I said, so what do you think? Can we go and sit with the chief executive and say, you're no longer a badge packer. You're no longer someone who just administers the event. You're someone who strategically can align this to the rest of the business. She said, William, the problem is my chief executive calls me Deary. That wouldn't work, Deary. We've tried that already, Deary. And I thought, these are the huge problems that the industry's got to come over. So they've got to overcome this perception that the event organiser is someone who's just logistical, just administrative. So that's my view on things in terms of where we are at the moment. And I'd be really keen to capture your ideas on where you feel the event industry is, what organisers do. And I'd like to start by just asking anyone if they'd like to make a comment or a suggestion about when they deal with an event organiser, what's the type of interaction that they have? Do they think of that communication being very logistical, or do they think it's quite strategic? And what comes back from the event organiser? So before I ask someone to chip in there, can I get a show of hands to let me know who would class themselves as an event organiser? Okay. So that's great. Who works in a venue? Okay. Other? Everyone else? Classes other? And what does other break down into? Supplier. Yep. Suppliers?
Yeah, convention bureau, destination marketing.
Destination management company.
Okay. Would you not class yourself as an event organizer?
Well, I work in sales, so personally, no. But I have worked as an event organizer in my past. But I guess my colleagues on the ground at each of our destinations, the role that they play is similar to that of the event organizer. They're supporting the meeting planners in the work that they're doing.
Okay, great. I found this because my session was about how to make good organisers great, and there's 4 or 5 in the room. So these things are fundamentally important when you're putting sessions together and conference sessions together, that you match the content with the audience. So I've got to really, really think on my feet to make sure that you get some value from this. So what I really wanted to do was just to make sure that we are all kind of on the same page here. And at the end of it, what I'd like to do is to try and get from all of you an idea of what the industry can do as a whole to take this event organizer, the people you deal with, take them from more of a logistical position to something a little bit more strategic. And then I'd like you to all think about the one thing that you could do to help the industry and help organisers become much more strategic. So that's what I'd hope to get out of the time I've got with you today. So going back to my first question, I've painted this picture of the event organiser being someone who's administrative and deals with logistics. Does that align with your experience when you're dealing with organisers on the DMC side or on the venue side or on the supplier side? And if you wouldn't mind, when you speak up, just into the microphone. Anyone like to chip in there?
I think it's changed a lot. We were just having
I'll just give you that if that's okay.
Sorry. We were just having this conversation at lunch that many of the event planners that I used to I work with and still do work with, it was more on a logistical role, and it was the logistics of getting to a destination and bedroom rates and flight access, that type of thing. But now it's more about the creativity, and I think that's probably because of the recession that they've had to diversify and offer more services to their clients. So they're looking for more of a creative angle on how to work with a destination, particularly from my case, or with suppliers. So I think that shift is definitely changing in terms of the meeting planner that I'm personally working with than I used to.
And is the venue reacting to that?
I would say some are, some aren't. We have some who are really trying to turn the whole meeting, the whole event on its head. And one example is the Bounce Centre, which is not to plug the destination that I'm from, but the Bounce Centre is a creative arts institute in Banff in the Rocky Mountains, and they are now, their approach is to talk to the client about what they want to get out of their conference, and then working back and saying, well, how can we help you with all the services that we have within the centre and all the creative people melting pot that we have within this facility? How can we pull that all together and help you deliver the conference that you want to deliver? And that's either to the end client or to the meeting planner. So they're turning it on its head. But if you're looking at something like a convention centre, then it's very much still logistics and sort of answering those questions in terms of what square footage they have and how much it costs to meet there. So some are looking at it slightly differently.
But you would certainly say that there's more organisers and more venues starting to think a little bit more creatively and a little bit more moving away a little bit more from the logistical and the administrative aspect.
Definitely, yeah.
Anyone else agree with that or disagree?
Hi, Richard Waddington from Event Marketing Association. I think you got the why and the what are two sides of the same coin. So I get a little nervous when you start saying logistics kind of is insignificant. Logistics is really, really important because you can be as creative as you want. If you can't deliver on that creative, the creative is pointless. So I think you've got to have both sides of the coin, and part of that is as you progress through your career, but even junior members of staff need to understand the why. Why are we developing this before we can develop the what? And I always used to use Jim Collins's 3 circles analogy and look at creativity, logistics and delivery as the 3 key components of what we do and what they are. And logistics and delivery are pointless if there's no creativity, as well as, so you've got to, the whole thing is the sum of the 3 parts.
I agree with you completely, and I think the difference is the role that I see in the organiser is that it was very siloed 10, 15 years ago, and when I started in the event industry, you were hired as a conference producer or a salesperson or a logistics person. And now it seems when I deal with event organisers, they're kind of expected to have skills that range right across that board. And it's an incredibly difficult job. And it's difficult when you're in an industry because you don't see the rest of the world in the same way. But I've struggled to think of a job that changes so much and has changed so much over such a short period of time. Every year I do 10 new skills for an event organiser. And the first year I did it, I thought, I'll do 5. And then I did 10 really easily. And then the second year I did it, I thought, I'll actually keep some of these over for next year, because this is how quickly the job is developing. And if you think about someone who's a conference producer, that's how I started. My job was to get people in a room and was to fill it. And that was the only brief I ever had. No one ever spoke to me about the organisational objectives of the attendees who were there, the learning environment that you created, the narrative and the structure of the content. It's completely different now, and I'll come onto it a little bit later with my ideas of how we move this industry along. But I agree with you completely. I think that the logistical aspect, the delivery is really, really important. But it comes back to this role of the event organiser, how we support them to understand that their job is so much more now than just the delivery or than just the creative. An event organiser.
Hi, Claire from Microsky Events. My kind of note was twofold. One is that I actually come from a theatre background, and I think the process now is much more about production than it is singly about any one of those areas. And secondly, that I'm managing director. That means nothing, absolutely nothing. You will find me on event litter picking, taping down cables, lifting and shifting, whatever it takes to achieve the objectives. And I think that point about understanding the why is absolutely imperative. I also teach at Falmouth University, and one of the things that we talk about with our students is understanding this is way too much hard work for it not to be enjoyable and not to understand why we're there. And that's the difference now, I think. It's not just about a simple or single process. It's about multiple processes in multiple contexts and having the adaptability, not just the creativity, but the ability to adapt to every single context that you're working in. And that might change. It might be a community event one day, it might be a corporate, it might be a gig, a festival. And I've had that just in the last 2 weeks. And I'm most impressed by those that can cope with that.
Great, that's a really good point. That leads me on to a question. Who works in the event industry? Yeah, who can define the event industry? Does anyone else find it quite bizarre that we have an industry that, as we've mentioned in the debate earlier, that can go from flower arranging to the World Cup final? And I wonder how we're training people as they come into the workplace and through university for this idea of the event industry and where they fit in. I did a session at Leeds University a couple of years ago in front of about 200 of their second year students. So they've been doing it for 2 years. And I said, okay, who wants to be a wedding planner? 60% of hands went up. And okay, who wants to run festivals? 30%. Okay, who wants to run parties? 5%. And I thought, I didn't say it, but I thought, oh, what a shame. Because all of you in the room are going to be working in venues, you're going to be selling exhibition stands, you're going to be putting conference sessions together. And I thought, I don't want to burst this bubble with this excitement. But I found it really interesting that there was a perception of the event industry that just wasn't true. And I wonder what role we've got as an industry to do that. And I think now we've got this year in particular, we've had some wonderful moments to make a real song and dance about what this boring side of the event industry does. So the first example would be the Invictus Games. Prince Harry's now an event organiser. How amazing is that? I actually live in Spain, so I've not seen that much on what the coverage was in the UK, but I don't know what our associations did to big up this fact that there's this guy, 7 months, can run an event like that. And he's now an event organiser. Have we done anything really to speak about that and say, actually, if he can do it in 7 months, surely it must be the easiest thing in the world. It is when you've got a black book that you can go, I think I'll phone. But there's an element of that I just don't know if our industry ever really gets particularly engaged and involved with. And I think the other, the name of the conference escapes me, but it was the one with Angelina Jolie and William Hague at the start of the year, which was at Excel, I think. I mean, the amount of column inches that was able to have was incredible. And again, Angelina Jolie's now an event organiser. These things, I just wonder what our industry does to kind of build up these facts. And as long as I can remember, we haven't had 2 really interesting, engaging stories like we've had this year for what is a sports event, but with really high moral objectives to try and raise the awareness of a particular area, and a conference which had a huge impact. I mean, this conference was the final part of a 3 or 4 year strategy, and I just wonder what our industry did to kind of really make people outside the industry more aware. Because that's what I think. That's what I think one of the problems is that we're not really. I've put this here because this is when I say to people, "What do you do?" And I say, "I'm a conference organizer," and they go, "All right, yeah, fantastic." And we just don't really have the passion about what we do. And I think it's the same for venues and for technology companies. And I don't think we're at that point where I don't say I'm a conference producer now. I would say I'm an educator, because that's kind of what I do. So there's a real perception thing.
Thanks. My name's Esri. I have a background as an in-house comms director, so I've been a client for a lot of organisations here. And I'm now freelance and also visiting lecturer in public relations at the University of Greenwich, which includes a module on running things that under the banner of PR. There are a couple of points I wanted to sort of raise, because I think they're connected to things that William's already been saying and you guys have been saying. One is the perennial question about whether it's more important to teach soft skills that can be applied in any situation, communication, collaboration, partnership working, team building, all those kinds of things, versus hard qualifications. Do you want somebody who's great on all those soft skills but does not have a certificate to say that they've studied event management? Or would you rather have somebody who can think on their feet, be flexible, etc., but doesn't have a qual, or vice versa? Then I think that to the point about the expectation that people in educational institutions, and I would broaden it out because FE colleges are very significant players in this field and should not be overlooked, not least in the area of apprenticeships. But the degree to which the industry, albeit a difficult one to define, is engaging with those institutions from schools, FE colleges, universities and so on. So, and that would then give you the opportunity to bring the sorts of stories you were talking about, Invictus Games and so on, back into the overall narrative about what the event management is. So I guess that's 3 points: soft skills versus qualifications, engagement with the education sector broadly, and then through that, how you bring the stories about the industry and how it's changing into that, so that people do have a good understanding of what's happening.
Fantastic. That gives me 3 really good points, I think, to ask you to discuss on your tables for just a few minutes. I think that's a really, really good lead-in. I think you might have to move. I was agreeing with the person, and he was fantastically intelligent, I must say. But yeah, I'd just like you to talk about what do you think the industry can do to really bring this idea that events is much more important and the organisers play a much more important role. How do you concentrate that on? Is it the soft skills or is it the skills that you think that they need? And the third point about how do you bring these stories to life and how do you get people much more passionate about the world of conferences, exhibitions and venues. So I'll just give you maybe between 3 and 5 minutes just to chat that through. It'd be great if one person could just kind of summarise very, very briefly afterwards. I won't ask every table, but if there's anyone who's burning and wants to do that, we'll get feedback. But the important point here is that we just get people talking about it amongst yourselves and start to have these ideas formulate.
William, can I just make a point?
Yes. Yes.
My name's Peter Wigglesworth from a company called Every Sense, and we're a management consultancy.
Hi, sorry, just one second. Before you all get stuck into the debate, Peter's just got a suggestion.
I just wanted to add something to the debate which actually might help answer some of those questions. And I think it relates slightly to the question that's up there, and actually sort of what do you do? And I think the problem with the event industry in general is actually it focuses so much on what it does and not the reason why it does it. And until there's an alignment between actually why it does something in terms of actually affecting maybe the behaviour within an organisation to improve its ability to trade in some way by reducing costs or increasing sales, until there's that kind of alignment, the event industry will always be transactional, which is where most of the industry is. It's actually at a transactional level where the client understands what they want, and therefore it becomes very, very price sensitive. So I just want to put that into the mix because I think it's actually really important, because actually it's not what you do, it's actually why you do it. And every part of the industry, whether you're a destination manager or whatever, should be aligned to actually the objectives of the overall event. Sorry, William.
Okay, no, thank you very much, Peter. Okay, yeah, I think that certainly adds to that idea. It is about why we do the things that we do. So yeah, 3 to 5 minutes to chat about that, and then we'll have a little quick summary, and then we'll move on. Okay, I've been earwigging on some of those conversations, and it's great to see you all having so much debate about it. What I'd like to do now is just ask each of the tables just to feedback one point, one idea, one suggestion on how we can bring this together, what the industry can do. Okay? Brilliant. So, anyone who would just like to nominate from a table and just have a... There you go, Iris. 1 point's perfect, that'd be great.
Okay, one point from this table is that we focused on the why rather than the what and the how. There's a lot of issues that we could go into, but the point that's been made is that we haven't really talked much about relationship with government and about how the industry can contribute at I suppose at a macro level, and what government can do to support the industry.
Okay. No, you don't have to answer this, but are there too many trade associations in the event industry? Yeah, okay, no one had to answer that.
I would say no, there's not. Well, there is enough, but there is now a body that's come together with all the trade associations, with the BBEP. Yeah, so sitting together, and I attended a seminar with them up in Liverpool with my association hat on, and that's absolutely brilliant. It's coming together, because the problem is the industry is so big, so there are different associations for different sectors of the industry, but there is now one trade body coming together too. We're on way from it. It's only 6 months.
Because there's competing aspects of the event industry, isn't there? You know, what's good for a venue is not going to be good for a AV supplier, for an organizer, for a sustainable. It's a very, very disparate industry to bring together. Did you have a point from your table?
I'll go with the sort of what I would say professionalisation of the industry. I think it's sort of ongoing, but certainly event marketing instead of event planner, event manager, and also looking at getting to a point that there is ongoing professional development and accreditation and recognition in your career progression. And then that then fits also with the industry, taking ownership of the industry and working more in partnership with the educators, so with the universities. Again, hearing this big gap between educators aren't educating the students the right thing. Well, that's also part of our fault. If we don't talk to the universities about what we want and need and get involved with the universities, what do we expect to get out of the other end of it?
Great. Who would be in favour of accreditation for event managers? Because it happens in the States with the CMP programme, and it's definitely a badge over there. It's difficult to get contract work in the States if you don't have CMP, whereas here, there's no similar body or basis for that. Do we think that's a good thing or a bad thing? Good thing that there's no, or there's CMP accreditation. Accreditation.
I think there's something like the fact that anybody can call themselves an event organiser, and whilst that makes it very accessible, as an event organiser, it really annoys me that there are people who are being completely slipshod about it and are bringing the quality, and not membership exclusive, but the people that I'm competing with in Cornwall, where I'm based, who are really not working to the same standards that I believe we should be working to, and it's to the detriment of the reputation of the industry.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. I'll just pick up on your idea of professionalism, because it's one of my real bugbears being in with my hat in the conference industry, that our industry is called the professional conference organising industry. And I often say it's like, in the Wild West, when the doctor would come along, and he had to put doctor in front of his name because you would never buy his weird portion off his little truck. But we're conference organisers, so we feel that we have to put professional in front, or you would never really trust us. And I can't think of many other industries that call themselves this kind of, we're professional. And I think that's really, really to the detriment of our association. We feel like we have to prove that by having this name. And if you're an organisation who call yourself professional conference organisers, I'd really question that. Because I don't think you should be needing to say that to the organisations you're working with. I think you should display that through your professionalism rather than having it in your name.
Not sure I agree with that. And the reason is that there are an awful lot of amateurs who organise events.
Yeah, but they can have professional in front of their name as well.
Community events is a big feature. The events industry. It's not the people sitting around here, but a lot of these people will be organising events for local charities and in their community, and that's amateur. That's what distinguishes it from professional.
But
So
I would
think
say,
there are times.
to counter that, I'd say there are some of the so-called amateur event organisers who operate to far higher standards than some of the people that call themselves professionals.
Would you mind just passing the microphone back? But not in this room, Ed, did you have a point you wanted to add? Don't feel you have to.
I think we were discussing that there's no substitute to hands-on experience. I studied travel and tourism management at university, and it was a 4-year degree. The first year, they kind of brought everyone up to speed on the basics like economics and account management, and sort of business modelling, that kind of thing. And then in the second year, they applied it to tourism. And then in the third year, you had a year's work experience that was paid. So I worked for an agency organising conferences and incentives, had a fantastic experience. And then when I graduated, that company re-employed me. So that gave me a foothold in the industry. So, if it wasn't for that job, how do you get a job if you don't have experience? So that's
I know that was echoed on your table as well, wasn't it, this role of experience. Does anyone else have any points that they want to chip in with? Yep, please.
Just following on from your point actually about university education, obviously it goes without saying not everybody can be university educated. I'm head of events at Somerset House, and within my team I have several people who aren't, and they have instead left school and worked damn hard to get to the level that they've achieved, and I'm not going to pinpoint against them because they don't have a degree, because actually in the 3 years that other people were doing a degree that might not be skill specific or subject specific, they have chosen to go out and graft really hard, and they have the soft skills and they have the knowledge and most importantly the experience that I need for my team. But I also increasingly see CVs for any level of the business. People graduating now, it seems necessary to do a year's internship. That seems to be the route that people are going after university. It's extremely expensive to put children through university to start with, plus a year of internship, which invariably people don't pay properly for. But if that's the way that it seems to be going, I think as an industry we need to get behind that, and I think we need to get behind paid internships. And I do believe the Kevin Spacey quote that was used earlier in the main conference hall is very relevant. If you're at the top of your field, get down there and bring someone else up from the bottom, but enable them to do that. Don't expect them as a 18, 19, 21 or 2-year-old to find the money out of their own pockets. From an organisational point of view, it's not a lot of money to bring somebody into the industry for a year, and they can go away saying they've worked for Jack Morton, whoever, Somerset House, with that on their CV, that's a very, very strong start for them.
I think that's a really, really important point. What I'm going to do to ask you when we finish, it's just in a few minutes now, is to think about the one thing that you can do within your organisation. And I think that's a perfect example that, someone here could go back to their organisation and say, we're going to look at paid interns next year. I think there's things, what I would really like to get out of this is some kind of meaningful, even if it's just at an individual level of change. And I think we can all do something, to kind of bring event organisers along. Okay, so where did I put mine? This is a lady that I deal with quite a lot when I do consultancy. Does anyone know what TINA stands for? There is no alternative. That's what I see quite a lot when I do consultancy. And as I said, it's quite understandable because an organiser has got so many things to do. And when you look at change, when you go in and say, I'm going to reduce 80% of your administration, which is the kind of target that I do when I work with organisations, you hope that they say, that's fantastic. But Tina normally says, well, what am I going to be doing then if you've got rid of 80% of my administration? And I say, well, what you're going to be doing with that, it's what we spoke about a lot, is this 80%, you're going to be adding value with that. And you're going to be spending more time researching, you're going to be meeting clients, you're going to be going to other events, you're going to be thinking about things completely differently. But it's really difficult to move the industry from this idea of doing things completely differently. I would throw in social media here, and I'm still amazed at the lack of uptake on our industry in social media. It baffles me beyond belief. And I'd love to run a session completely separately of that, but it's huge advantage for our industry, probably more than any other, and there's a very small engagement right across the whole sector. And I think that's an example of how slow we are as an industry to change. And the second one is technology. I run an event on event technology. I spend a lot of time with organisers speaking about technology, and it's another world. And I think there's so few industries who are still in this mindset where technology is something that's completely foreign to them and that they don't particularly want to engage with. And I think there's so many advantages from understanding social media and technology. And I think that's just two examples of where I think the industry is quite slow to change. Now, this is the event organiser I would love to meet when I go in. And there's certainly a few of them, and I've met a few of them just over the last year. And what I would say is there's kind of, when I meet these event organisers, I sit down with them, and it's a really easy conversation because they seem to get some of the bigger picture when we're talking about events. So I just very briefly want to cover what I think these big picture things are for event organisers. I'm sure we've all seen this late 80s mobile phone, a mobile phone now. I look at the event industry and I look at an exhibition from the 1980s and I look at an exhibition from last year, and I can't tell you which one's when. It's exactly the same. Octanorm, shell scheme, name, table, 3x3 being charged for space, people attending. The hosted buyer thing's really new, but really actually hasn't changed it. It's exactly the same, and that's quite peculiar. I look at a conference, apart from little things like TED and some of the other really innovative events that are out there, conferences are exactly the same. Look at a picture of a conference from 1980s, look at this room, and it's not different. That's really peculiar. And when I meet organisers, the superhero organisers, they get that, and they see that they have to have online booking, they see that they have to have mobile apps. They see that they have to engage with people on a much more fundamental level rather than just this kind of surface coming in to a session and then disappearing. I hope some of the organisers go, yeah, that's me. I recognise that. This is something that I've kind of discovered over the last few years. Every single conference is really about behavioural change. This conference is about behavioural change. But I wonder how much we actually realise that when we put the content together, when we decide on the environments that we're going to host our events. And it's the same for exhibitions. And most other events, a lot of the agency events that you run, your corporate events, it's a clear understanding of where you want to take people. But as an organiser, no matter what your role is in that event, you should be thinking about what you do that helps people change their behaviour. And as I said, I see this in the organisers who are really pushing to be really good organisers. I love this. I wish that was actual size. But these things are about that size. €3, €5, I think that's €10. Have anyone been into this shop, Happy Pills? It's fantastic. You go and you can spend half an hour in there, and you come out with this little jar of pills that they're all sweeties. And it probably costs the company about 3 pence. And right round the corner, especially in Barcelona, round the corner from here, there's a shop with just, you know, like you see at a cinema, with just racks and racks of sweeties, and you get a shovel and you put them in a paper bag. 1/10 of the price of this. But the people queue outside the door for that. And this is because the people who are selling these pills have understood how they make it an experience. And this is where I come back with a lot of events that we've got, is we need to make our events experiences, and we need to look at other industries, another way of doing that, because people queue for this and they pay for it. And that's why we have to make them experiences. When I started in the industry, my first job title was conference producer. Still see people called conference producer, and I never ever want to go to a conference that's been produced. I want to go to one that's been curated, created, designed. And I know these are little things in naming, but that really for me reflects the level of tailoring and engagement into the conference. And again, I see people looking at their events as individual rather than the next one before they move on to something else. And my final point is we're really, really lucky that the events have just kind of happened. No one sat down and said, this is the best way to run an event. You know, Salvador Dali didn't say, I will design a conference like this and it'll be fantastic. So there's nothing that we can't change within the events that we organise. And I think that's a wonderful, for me, when we're looking at art and collaboration, I think that's a wonderful situation to start, that you can look at every event you do and you can do it differently because it wasn't designed by any kind of genius. It just kind of happened. So that's the conversation that I try and have with organisers when I try and make them great. And as I said, I've changed this quite a bit because of the audience today, so I hope I've covered some of the points, but I did want to get that across, that I think there's a lot of organisers out there who need support from the industry, from their bosses, from their clients, from all the stakeholders, to just move them from this point where they're thinking about the event as a very simple thing to something much grander. And as I said, I'm going to finish, and I want you just to take a minute, write down the one thing that you can do when you go back to your office that might help an event planner or help the industry move from this position where people see as much more about adding value rather than just adding something else to their calendar. Okay, great. Thank you very much.